today. So thank you to everyone who's joining Kelly, Casey, and myself. We're from Loyola Marymount University in the EMBA program, and we're happy to have you here. And I suppose feel free to type in your questions in the chat and so forth, and we'll just go ahead and get started with the presentation. So today we're going to cover a number of different topics from the background in terms of how we decided to go virtual, and also the three innovations that we've covered, some of the theory that we've applied, and also Casey will talk to us a little bit about VR. But before we jump in, I thought we'd take a little bit of time to introduce ourselves really quick. My name is Nola Wanta. I'm the Senior Director of Business Development and Strategy for the College of Business Administration at LMU. And I work very closely with our graduate programs and especially our EMBA programs in terms of curriculum, strategy, and so forth. And now I'd like to turn it over to Kelly to introduce herself.
Hi, thanks, Nola. I'm Kelly Watson, and I'm in charge of the international strategy component of our EMBA program. Our entire second year is comprised of the international component of the program, and it includes the international trip, or what is usually a trip.
Hello, everyone. My name is Casey Joseph, and I am the instructional technologist for the College of Business Administration at Loyola Marymount University. So I help instructors with facilitating their teaching and their students' learning through the use of best practices in pedagogy and technology. So glad to be here with you.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much. And so we'll move on. So I just wanted to take just a little bit of time to talk about our LMU EMBA program. And so our LMU EMBA program really aligns with our mission, with the College of Business Administration mission, which is we advance knowledge and develop business leaders with moral courage and creative confidence to be a force for good in the global community. And there's a lot in there, and we've highlighted in our LMU colors what's really important to us around moral courage and creative confidence. And of course, you know, being a force for good is essential to what we do as a college and as a College of Business, but also in our EMBA program. And of course, the global community is where this particular presentation comes in. And so in terms of our LMU EMBA experience, we focus on the individual from the get-go, from the very start. So for us, leadership and strategy are core to the experience and the learning experience of our students. So at the very first year, they develop their leadership intelligence. They understand their leadership styles, how to lead others. Communication and collaboration are key in the first year, and then also throughout their second year. Also within their first year, our students learn all of the business foundations. I'm sure a lot of our EMBA programs are in the same light. All of your foundational business courses occur during their first year and some in their second. But we also focus a great deal on innovation and entrepreneurial mindset. The College of Business is very well known for our entrepreneurship program. So there is a part of their experience where they do get to experience developing a startup. So it's good in that space. But they take on these particular learnings around innovation and entrepreneurial mindset into their second year, where, you know, they do have the global and societal impact. And so in their second year, and Kelly will talk a little bit more about this, they look at global issues. They also take a look at this intersection of business, technology, environment, politics, and society. And so we've really changed up our curriculum a little bit to address these various issues and so forth. So I'm really looking forward to sharing, or the entire team sharing with you what we have experienced in the last year with our virtual reality. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kelly.
All right, thanks again, Nola. So the first piece I want to, we'll hold off on the virtual reality for just a second, because I want to first take you through some of the things that we do that are a little bit different with our international program to kind of set the stage for you. You can go ahead, Nola, next slide. We actually take a bottoms-up approach to how we do our international expansion projects. So it really starts in the fall of the second year of the program, where students identify, and again, this is very much aligned with our Jesuit ideals, but we want to identify a community need in the target destination. So the students investigate the daily life. They do it from afar at that point, but they really try to understand a particular topic area. So, for example, and usually it's an infrastructure related topic such as transportation or healthcare or education or something that, really is a community enabler. And they target that area, and then they try to identify what are all the challenges. So we give them sort of an open space to just learn about the challenges. And by starting with this, they then get a real feel for what is preventing maybe some migration or preventing business from taking hold in a particular community. The next step then is to identify, well, what's a business solution that could be mobilized for this? We are a business school. We're not looking to bring in, nonprofit solutions. We're looking for business solutions. So, for example, if they identify that, rural communities in China are struggling to obtain sufficient healthcare, then a business solution might be a mobile diabetes clinic or some kind of scanning technology. They then identify what is the appropriate business that would take care of that solution or offer that solution. So they need to choose a company that exists today. This is not an entrepreneurship project. They get that in another part of the program. But they identify a business today, and we ask them to identify a publicly traded company only so that they have access to financial statements, because that's going to be really important down the road. But so, for example, they might identify that Medtronic would be a great, company that's strategically aligned to deliver the mobile diabetes clinic, for example. Once they choose the company, they then have to demonstrate that they understand that it is a good strategic fit for that company. So what we have them do is they pitch the board of that company that, hey, there's this opportunity in this space, and we think we're well aligned for these reasons, and so they have to do research on the company to understand why that might be the case. They then develop a research plan. We then take them to that destination. So if we were going to China, we would have them execute that research plan in country. And, it's a combination of us bringing speakers together, but also them setting up their own meetings and looking into different potential opportunities. And so that international trip really becomes a place where they can validate their assumptions about the solution that they intend to deliver, and also come up with all of the drivers for the business plan. Because once they return from the international trip, they are expected to develop a robust, comprehensive, and integrated business plan. They then, which is a written plan, it's supposed to bring together everything they've learned in the EMBA. So it's a full-fledged set of financial statements. It's a full-fledged marketing plan, a production plan if they're to do some manufacturing, really shovel ready. And then what they do is on the last day of the program, they pitch that back to the board, and they hand us, a 60 to 70 page document with all of the details, and they do it in a presentation. And then we have the board grill them on whether or not they've really thought through all of these levers. And it all comes together, as I say, into these financial statements. So they really have to have understood all the costs. And the international immersion gives them that opportunity to do that. So it's, I imagine, similar to a lot of programs, except a little bit innovative in the sense that we don't start with that mentality of this is a destination with resources to exploit, or we don't start with business first. We start with the community problem first, and then we build in the solution. And it's super aligned with our colleague at LMU, Madhu Viswanathan. He does a marketplace literacy course, and he really is focused on this idea of bottoms up, triple bottom line business solutions. And so he's running that course alongside, and this really integrates a lot of what they're learning in that course as well. So that's our normal. So you can go to the next slide, Nola. That's what we normally do. And of course, then we had year 2 of the pandemic. And year 2 of the pandemic, we thought there would be an opportunity potentially to travel internationally, but with limitations. And so this would have been fall of 2020 that we had to, start working on a project. And because of that, we thought, well, we might be able to go to Canada. We might be able to go to Alaska, probably can't go much further than that. What could we do in that sense? And we had this really cool idea that luckily Nola and our dean were on board with, to apply the same sort of thinking that we normally do in international, but thinking about Indigenous people. And specifically, could we almost reverse it and do a project in the Native American communities, or in Native American communities in the US, using Indigenous communities worldwide as a template for that? Because there's a lot of different things that are happening globally. This is actually one area where the US is probably not that far ahead. In fact, could be behind a lot of other nations in how engagement with Indigenous communities happens. So our thinking was that if we did this, we might still be able to travel. And even if we couldn't travel internationally, we'd probably be able to travel domestically and at least be able to, go visit reservations, which would be an interesting experience. So we started off in the fall with the idea of looking at infrastructure-related concerns in Native American communities, and they could pick Alaskan Natives, they could pick Hawaiian as well. So it was kind of an open scope, choose communities, understanding that they're not homogeneous, that this is definitely a very broad and potentially quite diverse group to study, and go and find and go and try to ascertain some of those community problems. As a if we look at this as a proxy for international, there actually are a lot of reasons why this is not a bad field of study as a proxy, when you're thinking about a template for international expansion of a company. In terms of size, market size, it's similar to locations that we've actually visited previously, like Panama, Kenya, Croatia, Lebanon. So it's not that there isn't a market opportunity. And while they're not a homogeneous group, they do face similar sort of business obstacles, like challenges with access to capital, discrimination, poor infrastructure, and low labor force engagement. From a cultural context perspective, there are very rich traditions, which are there's a unique artwork, multiple languages, a long and complex history, and particularly a lot of conflict with the United States. And so that, provides a pretty interesting backdrop for doing business as well. It's similarly diverse to other international locations. Interestingly, Native American communities tend to be mostly free of Western influences like chain hotels and fast food. So it was our belief that venturing there could actually seem more foreign than, for example, going to Shanghai, where, as you know, there are a lot of Western influences. In terms of the business context, and we love this job because, of course, we're always learning along with our students. And what we became aware of was that recognized tribal areas have their own, they're self-governing, right? So they have their own laws and business traditions that are quite different from traditional American business traditions. And so businesses end up having to navigate a context there where, for example, land ownership is rare, which makes loan collateralization difficult. And getting project approval has to go through an interesting set of negotiations between tribal elders, chiefs, and the folks who want to engage in business. So it really is, again, an excellent proxy for doing international business. In terms of commercial growth, the market is evolving and growing similar to a developing economy would be. It also, because business schools have not traditionally been in these communities, tribal leaders were amazingly open to talking to us. And so we got access at a level that I think in most EMBA situations, we don't get access to. So that was really exciting for us because we kept pinching ourselves trying to, we couldn't believe that we were going to get, the chief of a former Mohawk chief who actually was an advisor to Obama and the EPA, so that was actually pretty cool. So as it was, we got support for this, which was really great. And we luckily got after some, initial questions raised by students, we actually got some really great buy-in, and it ended up being a very transformational experience, which I'll talk about in a second. But anyway, next slide, because then we go to the second pivot. So we approached March of 2021, it became clear that we were not traveling, that nobody was going anywhere. We were certainly not going to be allowed on an Indian reservation. So that brought up another set of issues, which is, are we really going to subject our students to 2 weeks on Zoom, right? Like at that point, people, none of the students in our class, we hadn't met in person, any of the students in our class. I know some of you are from different areas of the US, but California was still really, really conservatively locked down. So we were not, and our university was not allowing off-campus meetings or anything. So this was really tricky, right? How are we going to make this exciting? So a colleague of mine who is a sales manager for a big corporation ran a sales meeting using VR technology. And he told us about this company that was doing this and how powerful it was to be able to assemble people together in space in a really exciting and high-tech way. So I thought, okay, that sounds interesting, but I would certainly need somebody to run this for us. So we contracted with this company that was going to basically do it as a big event. And then 6 weeks out, that company canceled the event, said that they were struggling too much from the pandemic and were canceling all of their customers. I think they were shutting down the business. And so we were on our own. So now we've got Ellen Ensher, my co-professor, and I, 2 middle-aged women, suddenly faced with, okay, we're going to do a VR experience. And luckily, we were able to engage Casey, who's going to talk to you in a minute, because it wasn't the case that there was a built-in infrastructure for supporting VR technologies in our world. So we were very quickly into pivot number 2, but I'm glad that we persisted because it ended up being, a wonderful experience, obviously, or we wouldn't be here talking to you about it. And we learned a lot about, and I can inspire all of you that really it doesn't actually take a whole bunch of tech side to be able to do something like this if you're thoughtful and mindful and curate the content in a way that that really doesn't focus on the technology, but rather focuses on the content. So I'll just talk quickly about a couple of the ways we used it. And then, of course, Casey is going to give you more of the whiz bang about how it works. So first thing we did, we realized that we needed to build up some excitement. So we didn't tell the students what we were up to. We just told them that they were going to get a kit in advance of this experience. And we mailed them a box. And in their mystery box, they got a headset, a VR headset, and some instructions on how to just open the box and set it up and what apps to go download. And then we also, we had, in addition to the VR experience, we had curated some really cool content. We shortened the experience to 4 days. We brought in, we had a Native American chef who created for us a menu, and we all cooked that together in space. So we had all the ingredients for that in the box that we sent out. We had an expert on altar building. And so we had some of that, and we had some LMU swag just to, make it super fun. So they open up this box of tricks and they get this technology. Now, a lot of our students are also of a certain age and not necessarily gamers. And so we were aware that there was going to be a little bit of trepidation from our students as well about using the technology. So we did create some very simple step-by-step, open it, turn it on. We decided to use the Oculus because it's very simple. And so they did that. So we then had an orientation for them the night before our sessions began, where we had them come into the space. And again, Casey's going to show you the space and just do something really simple. They just had to figure out how to move around, choose a seat, and put a sticky note over their seat. And it ended up, they came into this space And of course, understand the context. We had not been together in space for over a year. And they get into this space and you see each other, and it's very tactile. You hear each other in surround sound, and it is mind-blowing because you feel like you're there with these people. And of course, everyone's got their little avatars, so we're laughing at each other. Some students immediately figured out how to do things that even we didn't know how to do. And so they were pulling out props, and it was, it became this really incredible, exciting, there was champagne, there were, we made a mess actually of the room, which was pretty funny. But it was a great way for them to get oriented, get a little efficacy before, the program began, and to continue to generate that excitement, that motivation. The second thing we did was had an immersion kickoff with our dean. Now, we had sent our dean, who's also a woman of a certain age along with us, this technology, and not a gamer. We had sent that to her previously and given her her own little training session, not expecting that she would become a complete VR techie. And so she embodied the spirit of everything, and she embraced it full on. So she, in fact, has more apps on her VR device right now than any of the rest of us because she's just had a hoot with it. So we had her give the kickoff speech, which also was pretty exciting for the students because can you imagine, you're not expecting this technical experience, and then your dean walks in. So she did, and she gave us a great, I literally walked up before she started speaking and handed her a Starbucks in the virtual space, which was just kind of, really, really exciting stuff. So she ended up kicking it off, and then we were joined by our first speaker. And so it was a really great way to sort of set off the event. Now, the thing to know about VR is that you can't spend too much time in it, especially at the beginning, because you can get motion sick. And just like any other technology, it's an overwhelming experience. And so you really have to do it in small doses. So we ended up interspersing the VR at different spaces throughout the program. One of the things we did was used it for our daily debriefs. As after you had done all the experiences in a day, then you come together in that space. And because of the use of sticky notes and the whiteboard and being able to move around and be, rather informal, we were able to, it was a good space for that type of thing. The other thing we used it for was 360 virtual field trips. So using the VR headset, you're able to access YouTube 360, which I don't know if anyone has ever used YouTube 360, but essentially it's, you normally would navigate it with the arrow keys on YouTube. But when you are in VR, you navigate it by turning your head around or looking up and looking down and moving in the VR space. So you are immersed in a 360 video when you are in VR, and it's right there. So because of that, we were able to curate a channel in YouTube of a bunch of different Indigenous experiences from around the world where you could actually be in a hut in Tanzania while someone cooked dinner, or in a camel marketplace in India while people are trading around you. And so that was mind-blowing. And so we interspersed those throughout the experience as well, so that we could continue to have people feel like they had actually traveled. And then, of course, we broke all of this up with the cooking classes we mentioned, the altar building. We also did some interviews of Indigenous people from Honduras and Tanzania by cell phone during the experience. So we did have, a lot of mixed media, I guess I would call it, different experiences. All right, Nola, next slide. And then the next one. So if you're contemplating using VR technology in the classroom, you're probably going to have a little hurdle to overcome with convincing folks that this is actually an educational experience and not just a boondoggle, or not just, good fun. I'll point out that good fun does have a role in motivation, in learner motivation when it comes to these things. And certainly novelty plays a role in that. So we'll acknowledge that part of the reason this was super fun was because it was so novel, and especially because we hadn't been in person. But that said, there is research by, Sitzman, 2011, talks about interactive computer learning games and simulations can apply social learning constructs. You can get effective cognitive and skill-based learning outcomes in those environments. There's the fact that it's interactive, which is really critical, of course, to engagement. And, even Bandura would say experiential learning is a precursor to self-efficacy. So the more folks are able to get into that space and feel confidence with the medium, the more they're getting self-efficacy with a particular experience or task. So, I think that if you're interested in creating this kind of content, and as long as you understand the learning, like any other mode that you're going to use in education, as long as you've thought through your learning objectives, you can use this technology to really enhance learning. In fact, we're so excited about the opportunities that this technology gives us that we're thinking that even in our travel-based programs going forward, we're going to incorporate some type of VR learning along the way. The great thing is the headsets are super accessibly priced. And you could send them to a speaker or somebody else that you wanted to bring in the space. There's also a manual way that you can access the space if you don't have the headset on. And that's just, it's obviously not the VR experience, but it's still an excellent experience. So let's go to the next slide. I'm going to pass it over now to Casey so he can dazzle you a little bit. And then I'll talk to you about some of the results after he's done.
I get to razzle and dazzle. I love it. I am excited to share the experiences. And as Kelly mentioned, we were all novices to this world. So I had just recently joined LMU. And although I was familiar with a lot of technology, VR was not one of them. And our school has a VR room. We had colleagues who expressed some of the challenges we might face trying to do this remotely. And I really appreciated Kelly and Ellen's vision and willingness to challenge this. And so we'll talk about some of those challenges and how we overcame them together. But I'd also like to share the experience with you. So I am going to attempt to do this through Hopin now. Allow me to share my Chrome tab. So the first thing I'm going to show you is called Spatial. This was the place where the keynote speech took place and where a lot of the collaboration took place. If you have any trouble hearing it, just put it in chat. Welcome to our VR room. So this is where many of the collaborations took place, where we had presentations. You can see that attendees were able to add objects. It looks like we have drinks here. I'm assuming they're non-alcoholic since it was an educational event. You have a view that is determined by the movement of your head. So you can look around, see the sky. There's a beautiful view of a mountain range. And of course, you could see the speaker from different angles. And the speaker can see the audience.
In kicking off something, I've never been invited to be the dean in a virtual space where I was welcoming a group of students. But what an experience.
When the event was going on, there were avatars that represented each person. The avatar has a photo of their face and a body type, and there's movement. And interestingly, depending on how far you are away from somebody, the sound is adjusted accordingly.
Well, welcome everyone. This is so exciting to see you all here in actual space for the first time.
This was our VR room, and this is Spatial. So hopefully that you were able to see that, and I'm getting back to the Hopin platform now. But this, there are a couple things to note in that. One is you heard Ellen's voice, who's on chat with us. So she was definitely one of the lead contributors to this. And second is you probably saw the Starbucks coffee cup that Kelly shared with our dean. So there were a lot of objects that you can create within this space that were passed around. And we'll talk about some of the ways that we prepared students for that, as well as we facilitated it. But I would also like to show you the other thing that Kelly mentioned, and that's the 360 video. And just to reinforce what she said, with the 360 video, if you're looking at something like a real estate property and you're on your computer, you could use arrows to kind of pan the scene. But in VR, it's a more natural experience because you're able to move your head. So in this video that I'm about to show you, you'll see a little bit of jolting. I was actually recording it with the VR headset as I was experiencing it. And it gave me the opportunity to feel like a director in what was going on. And this was something that was actually offered to the students as content as part of their learning experience. So I will share that now. And here we go.
It's believed that Europe's Roma people, also known as Gypsies, originated here in northwest India before mysteriously migrating west hundreds of years ago. If you listen closely, you can hear the roots of flamenco music.
So hopefully you appreciated my director debut. And we will go back to the slide presentation, if you don't mind, Nola. And let's talk a little bit about what we had to consider in making this possible. So Kelly did an awesome job of just panning the internet and curating specific apps that we could use. One of the considerations we had is pay versus free. And we were able to find actually numerous applications that were free that served our purpose, but there had to be some vetting involved with that. All that's free is not good. And so we narrowed it down to Spatial, which you just saw. That was the room where the keynote speech took place, with 360 YouTube content, which we curated. Rec Room, which is this virtual space. And for those who are still wondering what virtual is, it really is a full immersion where you substitute reality with something that's been created. So I think of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, where it says, come with me to a world of pure imagination. That's your VR space. The Rec Room has all these different spaces where you could shoot basketballs, you could play ping pong with people, you could play games with them. I went into the gym and I spent about 15 minutes trying to pick up a basketball, at which point I was taunted by what seemed to be an 8th grader for my inability to do so, and I left. But there are a lot of great things you could do within this space. And then VTime XR, Alt VR, these are spaces where you could have casual collaborations. They create a virtual environment. You could be by a campfire. You could be in a bar where, whenever you choose, there's usually a space to accommodate it. Okay, next, Nola, please. Kelly, just like real life. I saw your chat comment. Yes. Overcoming technology challenges. So one is choosing and downloading applications. I just spoke briefly about that. The other is creating a non-VR backup access for participants. This was particularly important for us because we didn't know how this would go. So we wanted to make sure that, one, those who didn't have, even though we purchased a VR headset, maybe didn't feel comfortable within the VR world, who weren't as technologically savvy, who for whatever reasons, they have their own businesses, maybe they didn't have the time to fully engage in the instructions, they had another opportunity to join us. So what we did is the app Spatial that I showed you has a compatible app on the PC. So you basically could go to your PC and download this app, and you could see what's happening in that virtual room. So you're not immersed in it, but you're viewing it similar to what you just viewed with this video. And because I was able to show that on my PC, that also meant that I was able to share it through Zoom. So we set up Zoom, and that enabled some people to come in, watch what was going on with the collaboration. And whenever they had questions, I was able to kind of be the voice of Zeus, and through the PC, speak the question, and Kelly and Ellen, who were in the Spatial room, would hear that voice. So we were able to moderate the virtual world with the real world, which I think worked out really well for us and gave people multiple ways to access what they needed, kind of along the concept of universal design for learning. We provided technical support options. There were Kelly and Ellen provided their personal numbers. We provided instructions in various ways. We pointed them to tech support where it was available. And then probably the most important aspect of it was the orientation. So having a carefree, fun environment where everybody was giddy when they first entered and able to just play with what they were doing was really important for setting the skill set needed for going into the keynote speech and the rest of the collaborations that they'd be doing. Managing expectations. We discussed this up front, that it was a learning experience, but it was also something that we wanted to be fun. And we wanted them to know that we were approaching something for the first time and that there could be a great reward for this if they participated. And I think by setting the expectation that they were participants in this, that it wasn't a show that they're just observing, I think, at least in the collaboration that I was able to hear through the PC, students were volunteering ways that the experience could be improved. If one student was having problems, like, you can create this object by doing this. Everybody started kind of forming a collective thinking about the space and taking ownership of it. And then lastly, we offered very specific instructions, and these instructions came through a lot of trial and error. Kelly, Ellen, myself, my training, the dean, we learned as we went, and we noted what we learned so that they didn't have to repeat the same mistakes. Okay, so next slide, please. And so we addressed other factors as well. We had, I believe, was it 25, Kelly? 25 headsets that we purchased at anywhere from $299 to $399 for the Quest 2. You have some accessories involved with that. It was during the time of COVID, so we didn't want students sharing or passing headsets around. That is a possibility. You can have multiple accounts on a headset. It's important to note that everybody has to have their own Facebook account, and there are privacy and security measures that protect each account, similar to what you would have with the PC. Paid versus free. We paid for the VR headsets, but everything else was pretty much things that we made available for free. For the students, the headsets themselves were available for free too. We considered creation versus curation. If you are interested in creating 360 video, there are things now like the GoPro Max for $500 and some software that will allow you to do that. The software is becoming easier and easier, and it's proliferating, but there's still a learning curve. So whether you're using Unity or some other software, there are limitations and there are skills that you have to develop to do this, but I think that's going to change drastically. I think we're going to see a world where it's user-friendly to create the content that you want, and then it's just a matter of your imagination and design. And then I titled this last one, Staying versus Going. There's a moment in VR where sometimes you do get sick, and you have to be mindful of what your triggers are. One thing we advise students to do is, if you don't know what to do next, take off the headset. Just stop the experience. You could also turn it off. But Kelly and Ellen were great about providing other tips as well. That ginger helps with nausea. And the reason people get sick is there's a mismatch between the fact that they perceive that they're moving and their body is still. So they now even have, which we didn't experiment with, but they even have, I think they're called treadmill shoes, where you're basically moving in place so that you're not having to move around your room while you're in the VR space and injure yourself, but you have a greater connection between your movement and what you're perceiving. So again, this world is rapidly evolving, and what we saw 6 months ago is even different than what we're seeing currently. But overall, the experience turned out to be great. I think the giddiness was in part because people had not experienced this before. I think it was also, they were in a COVID-free environment. Spatial is free of COVID. And I think it was also because they were able to truly collaborate. I mean, by day 5, I was watching these interactions, and there were moments where you forget that they're in a virtual space and they're forgetting too, because they're so focused on the learning and the ideas. So this was our virtual reality experience.
All right, so now I'll talk a little bit about how did the students respond. So I did a little survey at the end. Overwhelmingly, people felt the experience was fantastic. They appreciated that there was something novel going on. There were a handful of students, one or two, that did not participate in the VR portion of the program, or they participated, but in that way that Casey described, where they were outside of the room. One of those students preferred not to engage with a Facebook account, and the other student never could we did a lot of tech support to try to get her to use the technology, and she just at the end of the day said it's not worth it. And so you have to know that you're going to have some learners that just don't want to play, and that's okay. As long as you have a way that they can still be present and be engaged and be involved, then that's okay. But overwhelmingly, people were super happy that something exciting had happened. Again, we were doing a lot of different things at the same time. With the Native American experience, which was very transformational in and of itself. We actually did a social project as well as part of it, and it was completely mind-blowing. And there are still students working and helping the particular community that the Lummi Nation that we did a social project for. So there was that element as well. And so I think overall, people definitely felt exhausted at the end of it. So I think that the choice to make it such a short period was a good one. There was a lot of exhaustion. There was a lot of emotional exhaustion because it had been such an emotional experience. And then you add this excitement of being together and the VR piece. And I think it was, potentially just really overwhelming for a lot of folks. The one person who on the survey was underwhelmed or didn't like the experience. Interestingly, the feedback was that it was related to the speakers that we had chosen to bring. That person did not feel like the curation of speakers was what they had expected or wanted to see as part of the project. So that was interesting. It wasn't about the VR, and it wasn't about the fact that it was the Indigenous communities. It was about the particular speakers that we chose. So that's interesting, right? And you're going to get that. But overall, and if you want to go to the next slide, Nola, this was a comment that I just thought really described it so well, and it's too small for me to read on my screen right now. So maybe you could read it, Nola.
Sure. The quote is, "The EMBA team effectively designed an innovative capstone project in a time of great uncertainty. This experience was so enriching and encouraged me to break out of my comfort zone. Every experience of this capstone project provided useful tools that enhanced my business skills. Thank you so much for everything."
Yeah. So I think that really encapsulated kind of, everything at least that we had as a goal for the program was really encapsulated in that comment. So we're happy to open it up to questions now. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. We'd love to share this opportunity with you. And if you're going to curate an experience or create an experience for your students, we'd love to share, any more information. I think, as Casey said, it is definitely the future. And one thing I will mention is that there are programs out there in my research to understand this whole market. There are companies out there that are doing a lot of really exciting things. Like I know that there's a company called the Grandstack Group that I spoke to quite a bit about this, and they are doing a ton of stuff for Walmart, for example, where they have headsets, Oculus glasses in each store. And this is how Walmart's doing their sales training, is they, put on a module and, it's a custom program. So you could have a custom program created for your school. And I think right now it's still quite expensive. And there's the potential that content will change quicker than you can keep up. And so that was why we chose not to go down that road. Plus we didn't have time, because that type of thing takes quite a bit of development. But I've also come across organizations that are using the VR as practice spaces for things that have been trained already. So there's a bunch of research that shows that 4 sessions in VR with an avatar, for example, can actually allow you to enforce learning or, implement learning and reinforce it. So I think that there's some great stuff happening in this space. The great, Peggy's asking, was your technology or IT group overwhelmed by this? The thing is, it was just us. Like, you're seeing the group. So no, they weren't. I think the cool thing is that if you keep it simple, which we really tried to do, having the one single space that we assembled in so people knew how to get back into that space, that was quite simple. The 360 video is just an app on the device that's YouTube VR. And so you can get into that space by clicking, and again, we had all the instructions. We did have Rec Room. And the reason we wanted Rec Room was because we wanted to do a scavenger hunt in that space. And so Rec Room is also, it's just another VR app so that you if you preload it for the students, it's there. And then they can go into that space and navigate around it. And you can put out a bunch of scavenger hunt items because Rec Room, it's basically like a kid in a college dorm, and then they open and see you've got stuff in your room and you can customize your room. And then you go out and you're in this recreation center of a college. And then it has a branch to go off into all these different games and activities and things. You can go skiing, you can play basketball, as Casey mentioned. You can, and you can even develop your own, but we didn't go that far. So there's lots of stuff that you could do as a scavenger hunt item, and you could interact with other people. But in terms of the tech, like the tech for the device has its own technical support, and it really is very, if you've ever used any kind of Apple device or anything, it's like you push the button and it tells you what to do. So that part was there, and we have that tech support available of the Oculus folks. And then each of the different apps were really, I don't know what to say. You sort of had to go in them and just learn as you go. That's the type of learning it is. So we just tried to, whatever we did, keep it simple. Right, Casey, did you want to add to that?
I would say that each component is pretty much created by a business that understands the importance of making the user experience as friendly as possible. So when you're unboxing your VR headset, I mean, they have the drive of selling more. So they want your experience to be good. So everything's labeled on front of that box. It's the various components that you're working with that require some navigation, knowing how everything connects. VR isn't seamless yet in terms of if there's a code that you have to put in on your PC or your cell phone compared to the headset, you have to take the headset off. And that can be counterintuitive if you're used to kind of flowing in the online environment in a way that you don't have to do those physical changes. But it's maybe similar to navigating a new city, and kind of finding a new restaurant. And once you've dined there and you've kind of figured out where it's located and the parking, especially in LA, then you kind of have a sense of what to do next time. So I think it would take us a fraction of the time to do this again that it took us the first time around. And we did have support from LMU does have a VR room, and we had people who had done VR. So they were able to add some caveats about the challenges we might face doing this remotely. I think now that there might be the opportunity to do some things in person, that could help significantly because you could be with people, help them put the headset on, show them how to hold the controls, all those things we were doing by videos. And it's going to be different for every circumstance. So I think it's keeping it as simple as possible, knowing what your objective is, maximizing the time you spend training and giving people a chance to familiarize themselves with it before the event, and then allowing, managing those expectations and allowing some room for error and kind of the rewards that come from that adventure.
I'm glad you mentioned the videos, Casey. I forgot we did that. So because we had struggled, Ellen saying in the chat, she couldn't figure out how to hold the controllers right. So she's trying to press things and they're not on her finger where they need to be. So not realizing that could be a thing, we hadn't really sort of planned for it. So we ended up creating videos to say, look, this is how you hold the controller. This is how you pick it up out of the box. This is how so every time we sort of hit a hurdle, we'd like make ourselves a little YouTube video and say, okay, here's how you do these things. Or we'd make a little cheat sheet. And I think Casey's right that the more you do it, the more you're going to build up that sort of warehouse of, oh yeah, here's how you get through that. That happened to us. Another one was, you're in the middle of something and your app needs to update, kind of like how your Windows PC needs to update every time you're trying to do something. It's like we were trying to do something last week, Casey and I, and all of a sudden my app's updating and I got 10 minutes of downtime because my app's updating. So, but now that we know that happens, again, you can just plan in that time, like Casey said, plan for the orientation, plan for check-ins. You could even have like a separate room where people go to, a Zoom room just for tech, and, help people work offline so that then they can get back to the main session.
And if I may, as a parting word, since I know we're at the end of our time, just to inspire you with some of the things that are come. I mean, holographic images now and holoportation, where you're in a physical space and you see somebody who's physically away, but they appear as a three-dimensional hologram that you can interact, is already here. I mean, there's HoloLens. Microsoft came out with their Microsoft Mesh platform that's built on Azure. It's still expensive. I mean, I think these lenses cost $3,500 to $4,500, but I think you're going to see more and more of this where it's really a mixed reality. It's virtual reality imposed on a physical space. It's doing things within a physical space and creating a virtual reality that seems like it's in your living room, seeing people in very real ways. So, virtual reality is the beginning of so much that's to come. So it's worth the exploration.
Well said. And, where there's a will, there's a way. If you want to do it, you'll find a way to push through and get it done. So back to you, Nola.
Absolutely. I just want to thank everyone for joining us and for hearing about our journey and our adventure through virtual space. This was really the coolest innovation I think that we've done at the College of Business during pandemic times. And, one of the things that I can mention to all of our EMBA colleagues out there is definitely have that support. We do a lot for our EMBAs. And I always have said that our EMBA programs are the leaders in innovation, where we try all sorts of new things, new practices, new operations, and this happens to be one of them. So thank you so much again for being here with us and for hearing our talk.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Great. Awesome. I think we just... See you, Kelly.
Bye.